Hello and welcome to the BA Knowledge Share. In this episode, we continue with requirements analysis and design, specifically covering the task of defining requirements architecture. So the purpose of defining requirements architecture is to ensure that the requirements collectively support one another or fully achieve the objectives. So requirements are like a big game of dominoes. So if one falls, the rest of the requirements fall. So in this case, you want to ensure that you are capturing requirements in such a way that they are structured correctly. So the business analysts use requirements architecture to understand which models are appropriate for the domain, solution, scope, and audience, organize requirements into structures and relevant to different stakeholders, illustrate how requirements and models interact with and relate to each other, and show how the parts fit together into a meaningful whole, ensure the requirements work together to achieve the overall objectives, and make trade-off decisions about requirements while considering the overall objectives. Requirements architecture is not intended to demonstrate traceability, but rather to show how elements work in harmony with one another to support the business requirements and to structure them in various ways to align the viewpoints of different stakeholders. Traceability is often used as a mechanism to represent and manage these relationships. Traceability proves that every requirement links back to an objective and shows how an objective was met. Traceability does not prove the solution is a cohesive whole that will work. Some of the elements here are requirements, viewpoints, and views. A viewpoint is a set of conventions that define how requirements will be represented, how these representations will be organized, and how they will be related. Viewpoints provide templates for addressing the concerns of particular stakeholder groups. Requirements and viewpoints frequently include standards and guidelines for the model types used for requirements, attributes that are included and consistently used in different models, model notations that are used, and analytical approaches used to identify and maintain relevant relationships among models. No single viewpoint alone can form an entire architecture. Each viewpoint is stronger for some aspects of the requirements and weaker for others, as different groups of stakeholders have different concerns. Now, trying to put too much information into any one viewpoint will make it too complex and degrade its purpose. Example viewpoints include business process models, data models and information, user interactions, including use cases and or user experience, audit and security, and business models. Each of these viewpoints has different model notations and techniques, and each is important to ensure a cohesive final solution. The second element here is template architectures. An architectural framework is a collection of viewpoints that is standard across an industry, sector, or organization. Business analysts can treat frameworks as predefined templates to start from in defining the architecture. Similarly, the framework can be populated with domain-specific information to form a collection of views that is an even more useful template to build architecture. Number 3 is completeness. An architecture helps ensure that a set of requirements is complete. The entire set of requirements should be able to be understood by the audience in a way that it can be determined that the set is cohesive and tells a full story. Number 4 is relate and verify requirements. Relationships requirements may be related to each other in several ways. When defining the requirements architecture, business analysts examine and analyze the requirements to define the relationships between them. The representation of these relationships is provided by tracing requirements. PAs examine each relationship to ensure that the relationships satisfy the following quality criteria. Number 1 is defined. There is a relationship and the type of relationship is described. It's necessary. The relationship is necessary for understanding the requirements holistically. It's correct, meaning the elements do have the relationship described. It's unambiguous, meaning there are no relationships that link elements in two different and conflicting ways. Consistent. Relationships are described in the same way using the same set of standard descriptions as defined in the viewpoints. Number 5 is business analysis information architecture. The structure of the BA information is also an information architecture. This type of architecture is defined as part of the task plan business analysis information management. The information architecture is a component of the requirements architecture because it describes how all of the BA information for a change relates. It defines relationships for types of information such as requirements, design, types of models, and elicitation results. Understanding this type of information structure helps to ensure that the full set of requirements is complete by verifying the relationships are complete. So think of requirements architecture more so from the perspective of structure, relationships, as well as ensuring that their independence. So requirements architecture is almost like a parent of other information management tools, traceability, and other sort of organizational aspects of requirements. Some of the guidelines and tools used here are architecture management software. There's modeling software that can help to manage the volume, complexity, and versions of the relationships within the requirements and architecture. Legal regulatory information describes legislative rules, regs, regulations that must be followed. They may impact the requirements architecture or its outputs. Methodologies and frameworks, a predetermined set of models and relationships between the models to be used to represent different viewpoints. Some of the techniques used here are functional decomposition, data modeling, interviewing, organization modeling, scope modeling, and workshops. Stakeholders used here are the domain subject matter expert, the implementation SME, PM, sponsor, and tester that may assist in defining and confirming the requirements architecture. And they also add any stakeholder may also use requirements architecture to assess the completeness of the requirements. That being said, this ends the next, the current chapter. So that being said, before we move on to the next section, let's look at the task from the eyes of Amanda, who is our BA working through to move pizza joint from a from a brick and mortar store to an online store. So in this case, let's see what she does. So she actually basically takes a couple of steps back. It looks at how she needs to structure all this information that she has, right? So she has a whole bunch of information. She needs to understand how to organize these. She needs to understand which models are appropriate for the domain, organize requirements. She needs to ensure that requirements work together, and she needs to make trade-off decisions about requirements while considering the overall objectives. She looks at, or she creates a requirement architecture based on viewpoints and views. She has templates already that will assist her in sort of building out that requirement architecture. She works through whether these requirements are complete, they're cohesive. So she wants to ensure that. She relates and verifies requirement relationships. She also leverages business analysis information architecture. So she uses a couple of structures over here. Some of the guidelines and tools she uses are the architecture management software. In this case, she doesn't really have a specific modeling software. It's not a huge effort or complex effort. Otherwise, she would have leveraged other software to help her manage those requirements. And she would use legal reg information, and she would use a predetermined set of models and relationships between models that would represent different viewpoints. Some of the techniques she would use are the data modeling, functional decomposition, interviews, organization modeling, scope modeling, and workshops. And some of the stakeholders here she would leverage are the implementation SME, the domain subject matter expert, the project manager, the sponsor, and the tester, and any stakeholder as and when she needs their assistance. So this ends this task. If you do consider value in this videos, please do consider subscribing to this channel. Do consider visiting our website at ba-knowledgeshare.com or joining our Facebook group. Until next time, see you then.